Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Uwe Jean Heuser, the Economic and Business Editor of the ZEIT, and I have the great pleasure of talking to Toni Petersson this morning. Welcome, Mr. Petersson. Welcome, Toni. And we talk about Oatly, the, well, what shall we call it? The Tesla of non-dairy foods. And we talk about what makes a good company a good company. That's the question that were posed to us. Toni Petersson has been the CEO of Oatly for 8 years now, since 2012. He has had a career as a serial entrepreneur, and which was interrupted, I believe, by 5 years of a sabbatical in Costa Rica. We need to talk about that at a later stage, Toni. Yeah. And he very much follows, being Swedish, Japanese, the philosophy of Kaizen, if I understand that correctly.
Impressive, yeah.
Toni, let's start with that product of yours, with oat milk products, which have made such a splash over the last couple of years. What's wrong with milk?
Well, okay. Got it. Thank you so much for having me, by the way. Well, what's wrong with milk? Like, I don't know if, listen, you won't die when you drink milk or anything like that, right? It's just that it's a beverage that we taken for granted. It's put in a very central position when it comes to the Western culture and food culture. There are basically no other food that is so centrally placed, by tradition. But it's not a beverage that the human beings have been, across the world have been drinking for thousands of years, really. It comes with the industrialization in early and mid 1900s, right? We just feel that it's been taken so granted, and that people think that it's the beverage of life, and they don't understand so much that it's politically driven and not necessarily what's best for human beings or the planet. So when we set out to, when we started this company back, or the founder started this company back in early 90s, it was about making a liquid food that you can use as milk, in terms of functionality, cereals or cooking or baking or in the coffee, that was designed for human beings and better for the planet. Yeah.
So it must have been in the early 90s when scientists at the Swedish University of Lund came up with a different solution, which has something to do with enzymes. Maybe you can enlighten us what happened there.
Yeah, just the ability to break down the starches in oats. Like, what's unique with our methodology or our process of producing oats is that we actually take the kernel as a starting point. So what goes into the factory is actually kernel, not a syrup, not a flour, but a kernel that we then liquefy by enzymes. Very much the way you brew beer. In our case, we break down the starches, we cut the beta glucans in the right size so that the body can absorb it. And then you get a liquid out of that.
And you went to market in 1994, I believe?
Yeah, but the brand did not start it. The starting point of this company was basically to be an ingredient company. Sell this technology or license the technology to dairy companies or whoever else in the food space. But nobody was really interested in the product, right? So it started off in the mid 90s with private label, actually, or in Sweden and UK. And then the brand was established in 2001.
And so since 2001, you can actually buy Oatly milk.
Yes, correct.
So in at least in technology terms, in Silicon Valley terms, the question must be allowed, what took you so long?
I think, first of all, maybe, the maturity of the market wasn't there. willingness to adapt to something completely new probably wasn't there in the 90s. You know, if you remember back in the 90s, you know, being a vegetarian was extreme, you know, vegan hardly, like, they didn't exist really, right? So it was, the times were different then. But also, I think that we're more of a food tech company. And what we tried to do back then was to adapt into the play rules of food industry. So what we tried to do was to build the company as a food company, to think like a food company, to process things in the way food companies does. And I think that was probably the reason why it didn't take off.
So instead of a food company, you should have been a tech company, or what are you saying?
I'm saying that being so small player and just play by the rules that is established by bigger players makes things harder, right? So the ability to find a different route, to address things differently, to have a completely different angle wasn't in place back then for us.
Would you say that from the beginning it was rather an environmental message, or was it a message of the right nutrition, which are linked but they are still different?
Yeah, and that is so interesting. If you look at the evolution of the plant-based milk, when it started, it's been around for 30 years or so, right? And it started with soy milk in the Western society. Soy milk has been around in Asia for thousands of years. Yes. But here in the Western society, it was introduced as a replacement for milk for people who could not drink milk, you know, people who had a disorder, lactose intolerance. And then suddenly when almond came, the key driver was not really that. It was more of a healthy beverage thing. And now what we see is a conversion from milk drinkers, especially into oats and Oatly. So it has evolved throughout the times.
One of the advantages that Oatly claims, or that many customers say Oatly has, is that it foams so well when you make your coffee. Was that a byproduct by chance, or was that something your product development was aiming for from the beginning?
That is the merit of our world-class innovation team. So they did a fantastic job in creating this foamability through enzyme technology, which is basically what we did.
So this foamability was there from the beginning, or?
No, we developed that. It was launched back in 2014 as a new item. Before that, you could not foam the oat milk.
So what changed when you came in 2012? What did you change?
Oh, what did I change? Well, first of all, I'm not from the food industry, so I didn't know the rules of a food company. So basically,
which probably was a good thing.
Yeah, in that kind, yeah, probably that was one of the good things about it. But I think what I wanted to do back then, I entered this whole project as a consumer, from a consumer perspective, and I like just asking myself and the team, asked ourselves, like, what would we expect from a company today and in the future? And that's how we built the company. So establishing the core values, the reason for existence, was the key part of doing that. The reason I can't enough emphasize how important the reason for existence is for any company in the world. So we established that, and we knew that we had great products. We go deep into innovation, but the expertise should really be around sustainability and understanding people, rather than focusing on promotional plans and category management, you know? So that was the big thing. And then how we restructure the company in the way we work, like removing marketing department, removing sales department, have an integrated way of working, more flexible, more quick, more adaptable, and more reactive to things, honestly.
And then And then you, of course, you're also the face of the company in an advertising sense these days. And the company claims that you don't like this, but they made you the face anyways. So maybe you can enlighten us there. What's the truth?
Yeah, no, I hate it. I hate it. I like this. I haven't seen a commercial yet with the CEO that is good. And when they just launched the idea with me, it was just terrifying. But I have a lot of trust in my creative people. And I also understand that it's important to, a company is its people. It's not a logo type. So for me to represent the people in the company, I understood that concept, which is why I took one for the team.
Well, probably the biggest one you took for the team is the video, which can be watched on YouTube, where you sing. I'm not asking you to sing right now, but you do sing things like "Wow, wow, no cow." So, how did that feel, and who wrote this text for you? You have to tell us the story a little bit.
Yeah. So you're really bringing this up? I just hate that video. Yeah, they wanted me to sing a song and they composed the song. But when I was 18, I bought my first studio. So I have my, artistic integrity. So I wanted like that. You want me to sing that shitty song? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make my own song, which is what I did then. And well, the words were already, it was already in the text, in the carton, in the package, and in the packages and everything. So the text was already there. So I just sang the words into a tune and song that I made, basically. So it's actually live, as you can hear, because it's absolutely terrible. But I did it. It's done. But it's done. Is there forever, apparently.
Yes, you have to live with it. But I hope you cash in on the royalties at least.
No. Oh, yeah. That's the next thing I'm going to negotiate. Yeah.
Toni, when did Oatly start to diversify its products? Not only different types of oat milk, but also go into cottage cheese and other things.
So we made yogurts in the, I don't know, I can't remember if that was before I entered the company. We already had yogurts for the Nordic markets. And we knew we could do other products with the platform that we had built. So it's basically an oat-based platform that we can convert into different types of products, depending on what oat base we produce. And we knew we could do a lot of things. So we started to diverge basically immediately from the platform that already existed. We got into cheese, and it's important for us to get people to switch from animal-based into plant-based. It has to taste really good. So we have that. That is kind of the criteria for us to launch any product. That it has to be a food that people really like, right? So I think, to be honest with you, that started. The whole company didn't start off with a milk. It started off with a soup, and we immediately made creams, and that was in the early 90s. So already there, we had this innovation power of doing things. But commercially, I think as the brand grew bigger and, with proven success, we were allowed to enter different spaces commercially in different markets. And that happened during to 2014 and onwards.
I have an Oatly family at home, I'm afraid to say, and semi-American at that. And they, with a lot of envy, experienced that there can be Oatly ice cream being bought in America, but not in Germany. Why do you put us at such a disadvantage?
You put me on the spot here. No, it's purely due to capacity. It's due to capacity issues that we have. Not issues, but when you do triple-digit growth from a significant base already, it's really difficult for the supply chain to just keep up. especially when it's exponential, and it's hard to plan for it. You go aggressive, right? And you put up the budget for the next year, and you think it's going to be up what 60-70%. You think that's pretty aggressive. Then it turns out to be 100%. So it's basically impossible for the supply chain to keep up with it, right? So it's a supply constraint, unfortunately.
So is the US market for you more important or easier to serve in some way?
Well, no, it's not more important, but it's a very important market. So is China. But I would say it's less complex than Europe, right? Because in Europe, you have all these different languages and different regulations that are local. So there's a lot of complexity. So if you can to manage Europe is the hardest thing you can do, according to me, but all regions are important for us, equally important.
And do you use local oats for your product, or do you ship oats around?
No, that's the good thing with oats. You can grow them anywhere. You can grow them in every continent in the world. So from a supply perspective and sourcing perspective, it's just wonderful. So in the US, we use Canadian oats, actually.
And what is your fastest growing market right now?
In percentage.
Yeah.
In percentage, it's China.
Okay. From a low base or from a high base?
Low base, but it's tracking US. So we launched in China a year after the US, but the trajectory is exactly the same thing, or even stronger in China, which is pretty amazing, because before we entered China, that category, plant-based category, did not exist as a concept. Oat milk was a cow's milk with chunks of oats that you basically had to chew. So we introduced something completely new to the market, and we launched a completely new category, and we've been extremely successful. And due to the size of the country and the population, when things start there, it gets massive. But we have healthy growth everywhere, and I think we're lucky in that sense that we're not just performing good, we are doing beyond expectations in every single market we enter or are in. And that's also the problem in the supply-demand ratio, right?
Sure. Give us an example or a number for Germany. How many Germans use Oatly products?
That I don't have that number, but if you look at the penetration of people in household penetration in Germany, it's a little bit more than 10%, but there's a lot of flexitarian. So in the US, the share of plant-based versus dairy is 16%. Okay, so it's a little bit higher, and it's accelerating. So even though there's a hype around plant-based, it's barely the beginning. It's barely the beginning.
So if I was the milk industry, the cow milk industry, I would probably start to take you seriously and try to fight you off. Do you feel that? Do you feel attacks from the established players?
Of course. They are threatened, but you got to remember, if you go to the US, milk consumption, cow's milk consumption has declined since the 70s. So it's not a new phenomenon. It's just that now you see a lot of different alternatives that can take that place. And sorry, can you repeat the question so I just answer correctly?
No, the question was whether you are being attacked by the milk industry and its lobbyists.
It's not only that. I also think that the regulation across the world and in Europe is favoring milk consumption, right? But it's not necessarily where the consumers are going. So there's a glitch, and you need to incentivize. I think the consumer base and where it's going, all the way throughout the whole supply chain and value chain, you need to create incentives in order for the industry and the farmers to grow the right things and the industry to produce the right things that the consumer wants. So I feel that we're not only, the opponents are not just milk industry, but also politicians that are that are like, they're still working from what happened before, and they're not looking for the future, which is a problem.
Here and there, you see what you haven't seen before, sort of criticism of the product, and sort of at its core. One of the criticisms is that your product has or creates a special kind of sugar, which is especially strong in raising blood sugar.
Yeah.
The so-called maltose.
Yeah, but it's a very simplified way of putting it. So any empty sugar, you should be careful about, right? Any lemonade or soft drinks or anything like that. But in our product, the macronutritional composition consists of proteins, unsaturated fats, carbs, and fibers. It's the combination. So if you have that with the fibers, it's actually the opposite. So we're one of the very few products in Europe with a claim. So we can actually claim heart health. Like if you drink 3 glasses of oat milk, Oatly oat milk, you'll reduce your cholesterol levels. That is scientifically proven. And also, we see that in Germany, you actually have something called oat treatment for diabetes. I don't know if you know, but once insulin doesn't help anymore, they turn into an oat diet, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's where you also can use the oat milk, which doctors in Germany are doing today. Some of them, not everybody, of course. So I think it just represents the world we're in, right? The world of when you try to simplify things, then you get the wrong picture.
Sure, and of course, in a way, that's a journalist's work, simplifying and then putting it back together again. But so help me out so we really understand. Does your production process create this maltose or not?
No, it comes from the oats. It comes from the oats. But yes, throughout the process. So everything. So we don't add anything. So it's exactly the same process that if you would take a kernel of oats and you would chew it and you would digest it, it's exactly that process that we're doing.
And would you agree that it then, by consuming it, raises the blood sugar or not?
No.
Because it has such high glycemic value? No.
Yeah. Well, okay. That's a hard question because we've looked at it, but with the fibers, it's actually the opposite, which is why you can use it for diabetic treatments as well.
Okay.
But does it raise it to some level? I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Well, it's probably a question you have to face because it's kind of spreading online, and of course, the more popular you become, the more interesting it is to criticize you.
Toni, that's part of becoming bigger, and
yeah. Another focus of criticism has been the fact or the choice of your investors. Of course, growing like Oatly does, you need investors and you need new money. The new investor that came on board is one that has not only friends among your customers, to say it politely, and that's the American investment fund Blackstone. Run and founded by Stephen Schwarzman, who is very close to Donald Trump and his administration, and who also doesn't have a clear-cut, climate-friendly investing policy in his in his dealings. So, why did you take him on board, and how do you answer your critics that he might not be quite on message?
Yeah. So here's the thing, and I just want to put it in perspective, right? If you look at Blackstone, it's run by Schwarzman, who's been supporting also different presidents, right? And they also have John Gray, who was asked to be the ministry of the finance minister during Obama administration, and Tony James, who's one of the biggest contributor of the Democratic Party, right? So again, it's not black and white; it's a mix of things. So what we feel that, okay, you look at the world and you see that it's not great, so we need to do something, and things are not happening fast enough. We also have a strong perception that money and capital shapes the world. It's one of the bigger elements in shaping the world. So in order for things to change, money got to change. And Blackstone is like, you can look at basically any private equity company. They make all sorts of investment, but proportionally, the investment, the ESG investment versus the mainstream investment, the gap is way too big. And it's all about getting the mainstream capital to change. And that's what Blackstone's money here represents. That money needs to shift into more sustainable investments. And that's how you are creating change. And I can tell you, but it's more complex than that, because I can tell you, and I think basically every private equity player they really want to invest in sustainable companies, but it's a supply and demand problem too, because you don't have many viable, commercially viable companies with a strong sustainability mission, right? So in order to close that loop, you need to provide the market with more sustainable companies too. So this event itself is not going to change things, but it can trigger things, and it can send a strong signal to the market. And, I think everything is needed. You want to create systemic change, everybody is needed, and everything is needed. You need activism, you need idealism, and you need to be extremely practical and pragmatic about how you want to create that change. And I think what people are forgetting is the word change. How do you change? How does that happen? And in that aspect, we are being extremely pragmatic about things. And I do understand, we knew that we were going to be criticized, but from a sustainability standpoint, we absolutely believe that this is the right thing to do.
So you're not surprised by the strong criticism. Did you know that?
No.
That Blackstone, for example, also has investments in soybean agriculture, which means cutting down Brazilian rainforests.
I think they would strongly disagree with that, but I'm not defending Blackstone. You have to speak with Blackstone yourself. Yes, we were perfectly aware of that. So it's that money needs to change. It's as simple as that, but it has to start somewhere.
An earlier investor is a joint venture between a European fund and a Chinese fund, which together they own about 30% of Oatly. Is that a problem these days? It seems that Chinese money is not welcome everywhere these days.
Well, again, I think we have a very pragmatic approach. We think the climate cannot wait. Okay. We need that. We think that it's one of the biggest challenges that we are facing. And the reason why we're sitting here today is about climate. If you look at China, China is the only place in the world where cow's milk consumption is increasing. So it's projected to triple by 2050. And I can just tell you, if that happens, these meetings doesn't matter. They don't matter. Well, whatever we do in Europe or US won't matter, because just to feed that population with 3 times more milk than today would just blow things away, okay? So for us, it's about we need not only to be there, we also need to be successful being there in order, which is why we created a whole new category for consumers. So, which is, by the way, exploding completely now. So,
what do you mean by the new category? Sorry.
No, we created this plant-based category. Plant-based category,
Okay.
plant-based build as a concept did not exist. They had soy, which is a culture. You know, this is a new thing that's happening. That
For China, okay.
For China. So I think that it's how do you want to create change? You know, and we can do what we can do, and that's what we're doing. And it's about trying to convert people from drinking cow's milk into Oatly.
Which brings us back to Kaizen, which is, from my sort of beginner's understanding, a way of continuous and eternal improvement. Tell us how this philosophy drives Oatly or influences your decisions.
Yeah. Being half Japanese, I think it's like inherited in my genes somehow, the Kaizen. And but as a philosophy, I think it's super interesting. This is how everybody who's in the industry, they know that that's how Lean was built upon that philosophy and all that. But you're right, continuous improvement that every individual in the company is part of, and constantly think about how can we do things better is one thing. But to me, the biggest thing maybe is that a problem, it is about solving problems, you know, seeing problem not as a negative thing, but a positive thing. Because if you fix that problem, things will get better. And basically that reflects my work. I go to work every day to solve problems. That's what I do, you know? And if I would think of problem as something negative, I would probably kill myself. I would not wake up in the morning. Like I would not want to go to work, right? So instead, it's something that is positive. And if you think about that as a company, it's actually empowering people to do stuff.
And how do you instill this sense in your people? How do you incentivize them to be part of this?
So going back to what's important for a company, I think the biggest motivation to work for Oatly, in Oatly, is that we share the same core values. So again, the reason for existence. It's the reason why we can hire people. It's why the talents in the world, why we can keep them. And the reason of existence is also the reason why we can develop our company to, you know, propel it into a different dimension. So those core values are so extremely, and that's the reason why, you know, we're not far apart, but, you know, waking up January in Sweden is not really a nice thing. You know, it's dark, windy, it's cold. And you're just like, why do I get out of bed? You know, it has to be a reason that goes beyond your paycheck, right? And that is why people, I think, enjoy working for Oatly as a company. Mm-hmm. And we have constantly, as like building the culture, being in those values, we have to develop the culture. We're not perfect in any sense, but being very ambitious and genuine about our purpose and mission is extremely important to us.
Are there things you wouldn't do? Are there limits to investors you would take, products you would roll out on the market, competitive measures you would take? Where does the buck stop for Oatly? Where does it define the limits of a good company?
Of a good company?
Yeah, where you want to be a good company, as we know, and most of your employees believe that. So
yes.
What do the values say, what you don't do?
Well, I think, yeah, I agree. I love the concept. I think mainly it's about what you don't do. But in this case, it's about what we do. And if we don't do those things, like launching sustainability initiatives, for instance, if we don't do that, we're just, you know, it's just going to be pretty words, right? Empty. I think that it's when you're not genuine about your mission, genuine about what you speak about, that's when you lose the magic. Okay, that's hard for anybody but the people in the company to know and understand, right? But it's how we speak about, the way we talk about sustainability on philosophical level every single day. Mm-hmm. We speak about sustainability on a philosophical level, what that really means for the company, and that's going to be involved. And I think that when we just pursue profits recklessly over planet, then you cross the boundary. And once you lost the being genuine about your ambitions of trying to make this world better, then you cross the boundary. Then we're turning into something else. Then we're just going to be an ordinary company, try to create shareholder value and all that, Then we just cross that boundary, and it's going to be super hard to get back again. So I would say that those are the boundaries for us.
Being good also seems to involve political missions. At least in Germany, you're behind a drive to introduce CO2 labels onto food.
I just want to say, being a good company doesn't mean that you're perfect in any sense. Again, right?
No, understood.
And we don't consider ourselves to be perfect. We're not. We're so many mistakes we make every day. I make the biggest mistakes in the company, but you're right. We are super, super committed to the climate mission, and we just feel that it's. I'm just amazed they went through the Bundestag and that it's processed there. But I think it's just fair for consumers to understand, know about their own consumption. Here's the impact, and I need to compare that with other products, and because unless you have that reference point, those numbers doesn't mean anything, right? So it's all based on the fact that everybody shows the numbers. So that's what I think is absolutely necessary to create more awareness around consumption. And also, I think it's one of the things that is not so flattering about companies is that all companies want to speak about how good they are, but it's often about how good you're not, right? So talk about your flaws and mistakes. Like when we present the products on the web page, we speak about the amazing things about a certain product, but also the little less amazing things about our product. And then it's up to the consumers. Then you have the ingredient list where you can see exactly where it comes from, the supplier's name and origin of the country. And then you add the climate label upon that. It's just to give consumers information enough in order to make a decision. That's what it's all about.
Having gotten to know you and the company a little bit now, let's talk about climate some more. One of the major problems of milk in a climate perspective, of course, are the cows. Not only feeding the cows, but also the methane that they emit. So there is kind of a natural alliance between you and companies like Beyond Meat, who try to substitute for cow meat and other meat. Are there these alliances? Do you feel that you're sort of fighting together?
We don't strangely enough, we don't actively work together, but our missions, I think, are the same. The mission is there. We share that. We believe that the food supply system is, it's one of the biggest challenges that we have, and it's rarely spoken about it in that sense, right? Everybody speaks about transportation, speak about energy, not food. So I haven't heard decision makers speak about food the way it should than the food supply system. And I think that's one of the things that needs to be fixed, and that's a systemic shift that needs to happen. And I think we share that mission.
Mm-hmm. What, according to your experience, makes it so hard to drive this change? Because obviously, nations and governments have a very hard time sort of touching the subsidies and regulations for traditional agriculture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. I interrupted you.
Please.
Sorry about that.
No, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the way you incentivize agriculture is one of the key points here, and help farmers to make a transition, because it has to be a win-win for everybody, for planets, for farmers, for consumers, right? So what we see today is that, you know, I feel that decision makers they just stand where they stand and they just continue to dig the hole, right? Instead of moving your position. So that's what you need to do. You need to incentivize the right things, but we're not there yet, which is why we have to drive it very, like, I wouldn't say aggressively, but like to raise the awareness among consumers. I think it starts with the fact that also going back to how central, in our case, cow's milk has been. You know, in Sweden, you get, the schools are subsidized. One, you know, I don't know the exact number, but about 1 Swedish crown for 1 liter. So if you buy 1 liter, you get 1 crown. But only if you also put the posters in the schools up promoting milk with the dairy brand, which is just absolutely ridiculous, right? How can dairy companies advertise at schools and schools get money? I think it's an uneven competition field when you put those incentives in place. Then that needs to change. So the hurdle really starts, and when you start as a kid, because it's about adapting your preferences, right, in terms of flavors. So when you start to drink that, you know, you start a behavior among children that needs to change, and that's one of the biggest hurdles that we have in front of us. So we need, like, decision makers not necessarily think about being elected or re-elected, but what's actually good for citizens and the planet in the future.
Well, if you look at it from the standpoint of where the decision makers are, it's kind of interesting. They're in the cities, and cities like also Scandinavian cities like Copenhagen, even Stockholm, aim to be CO2 neutral, but they never factor in agriculture because the food comes to them, but it's not produced within their city limits. It's produced outside. So maybe a little more specifically, how do you think we should go about integrating agriculture into our CO2 and climate considerations?
Yeah, which is, and yeah, food itself is what, you know, like if you look at animal production today, it's about 15% of the total carbon footprint, right? More than all transportations combined. We use about 38% of the ice-free area on Earth today to produce food, just to try to picture what that is. And you have the global warming, and you have the population today of 7.6 billion people. We use about 70% of the freshwater resources today to produce food. Okay, 2050, we don't have a choice, right? 2050 will be about 10 billion people. If we don't do anything now, the cost on the society is going to be so big, and you know it will be really difficult for us to live here, actually. So we don't have a choice. Things needs to happen. What we think about is that the way we launched a scientific study about agriculture, where you actually, as a farmer, reduced the land use by more than half, just by reducing the animal production and increase certain amounts of plants into the farming. You could feed 3 times more people, and you reduce your climate impact by half, and the farmer makes more money. Now, that is a solution. That is actually something that can call for a systemic shift in agriculture. And that is a concept that we are now expanding. So you need to have proof points. Can you actually produce things in a different ways? And how can you think about that whole system so that it fits, it serves the planet in the future, right? So you have to be super active on the agricultural level. And it's not just about, you know, more grass-fed cows, or it's about completely changing the system.
Which is very hard. If you look at at the EU agricultural system, what you have is on one hand, many farmers, especially small farmers, who work for very little money in terms of the prices they can raise on the market. And then on the other hand, they have the subsidies which they depend on and which don't seem to go away. So they don't get enough money on the market, but they get all this money from the state, which they shouldn't be getting. That's kind of the picture. And you say, well, if we change that, farmers could actually make more money from the market and need less subsidies. But how do you make that believable? Because it sounds like a miracle in a way.
Yeah, which is why we need to prove it, right? So we had this concept. So what we do is that we have this concept of agricultural model that we are now expanding in Sweden, but also taking outside Sweden, because what you need is proof points. You need to show that it's actually possible to do that for real. So we used as the fundamental piece a scientific study that we actually took live into one farm that we're now expanding to other farms to see if we can expand that. And those are the proof points that you need in order to change. And you're right, the whole system is broken. Cow's milk would never be launched as a concept today, simply because it's so costly, monetarily costly, but also for the planet and climate, right? It's just a concept that would never be launched today. So how do you go about, how do you go around that now, as a decision maker? And the number one point is that it actually comes down to the Kaizen. Identify the problem, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Kaizen in politics, that would be something new for sure. Can you maybe give us a sense of the percentage in, how much CO2 does a liter of oat milk sort of create as opposed to a liter of milk?
Okay, you put me on a spot here. And
I didn't mean to in that sense, but just give us a rough estimate. Estimate.
So the carbon footprint is anywhere between 65 to 80% less with oat milk. And if it's like 0.3 something per liter carbon emission, I'll let that be unsaid. I think I need to speak to my sustainability people about the exact numbers. But the reduction, if you pick an Oatly oat milk over cow's milk, it's about 65 to 80% reduction, depending on where you are in the world.
And that also would go for all other kinds of milk products, or?
Yeah, basically it's equivalent. You can just move that. Yeah, but if you look at cheese, for instance, cows, cheese is probably has even higher impact than milk. So it would be a bigger difference choosing a plant-based milk. But our challenge is we need to make a cheese that is good enough.
So do you think that having a labeling of food products in Germany would be a good start?
It would be a good start for many different reasons, because it's information that is actually valuable if you have other reference points, but also it triggers a thought process in how you consume, right? Raise the awareness of consumption. It's incremental. So I think it will trigger a lot of different things in the right direction.
All right, Toni, when are you going to take another 5-year sabbatical in the Caribbean?
Who knows? I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but yeah. Hey, it's about doing fun stuff, doing something that is meaningful, right? Whether that's work or during your leisure time, it really doesn't matter. But something that rewards you, that goes beyond just money. As long as I can find that project somewhere, I'll just keep going.
All right. Well, good luck with the company and good luck with finding more such projects. Thank you very much.
Thank
Toni
you
Petersson.
so much for having me. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.